The lens hood is a very handy accessory to have, but definitely there are times when I'm leaving that lens hood off very much on purpose. And in this video, I'll share with you when I choose to use the lens hood and when I definitely leave the lens hood off on the 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 Canon zoom lens. Here are the reasons why I don't use the lens hood on the 70 to 200 millimeter lens at various times. First one is when I'm using filters, adjusting the filters, whether if you're adjusting a polarizing filter or if I'm using ND filters, the lens hood just gets in the way. It is to use those filters with the lens hood is just a complete and utter hassle, an absolute hassle. So I do not use the lens hood when I'm using those filters. Another reason I don't use the lens hood on the zoom lens is when I'm looking for lens flare. I do Seascapes and indeed many other setups in photography where I'm wanting to work with the actual lens flare. I love some shots with lens flare from time to time. It can work really, really well. And having the lens hood on does not generally assist using the lens hood at all. So off comes the lens hood when I'm working with lens flare. Another reason I don't use the lens hood is when I just want to be a little bit more discreet. If you're carrying the gear around, you're hand holding, you're walking around with the lens, it's a relatively chunky lens, and adding on the lens hood, it certainly makes the whole thing just a bit more obvious. Not that you exactly go invisible without the lens hood, but it certainly looks more discreet without the lens hood, which is another reason why sometimes I'll take that lens hood off if I'm in a certain situation. It doesn't make a huge difference, but it makes a difference. So it's another occasion when I do take the lens hood off. Another occasion where I just don't bother putting the lens hood on is if I'm using indoor natural light in a studio setup. It's on a tripod using the natural window light with some reflectors. The exception would be if I was doing the studio light with a lot of artificial lights based around the camera, and that where I'd be concerned about light getting on the lens and I'd be wanting to protect it from a particular artificial light source. But this natural light setup where I'm using reflectors and everything, there's just no need for it. So that's another occasion where I just don't bother with the lens hood at all. If you're photographing things quite as close as possible with the 70 to 200 millimeter lens and you've got the lens hood on, now depending on the angle of the light and everything, the lens hood occasionally can create shadows, generate shadows onto the subject, or indeed affect the actual natural light close up to it because of where the angle of the light. So on those occasions, that's another reason where I'd be leaving the lens hood off. And it might be when I'm out and about on location, if you're getting up close to his object, depending again on where that light source is coming from. And the final one is where, say I'm photographing through a cyclone fence or a particular object and I want to get as close to the fence as possible. That lens hood acts as a barrier, pushes the actual front element further back because I physically can't get any closer because the lens hood is stopping it. So that's the final reason why I'd be not using the lens hood, taking the lens hood off, or just not putting it on in the first place. So here are the main reasons why I do use a lens hood. And the number one reason that I use a lens hood is it protects the lens. Accidental knocks and bumps, etc. It is brilliant. The number of times I've had even the smallest of knocks, and you go, that would have hit the front of the lens, etc. So that has been a really big reason to use the lens hood, and it's fantastic for that. So just like I mentioned in the reasons why I take the lens hood off, in this case, it applies where I want to get rid of as much lens flare as possible. So it depends on what I'm shooting and everything, obviously, whether I want lens flare or not. And it is the first port of call about reducing lens flare, get that lens hood on. The third one is where it starts to drizzle, where it starts to rain, any light drizzle on that. The lens hood is fabulous at keeping the actual raindrops off the UV filter or whatever that's the front element. whether you've got a filter on or not, it helps protect. And then the next one is it keeps fingerprints. The number of times I find myself, for whatever reason, without the lens hood on, the number of times it's so easy to end up with leaving a fingerprint on the UV filter or whatever is extraordinary. So it's very effective for that as well. And then just like the flip side is where I try and look a bit more discreet as a photographer. So I take the lens hood off. There's occasions where you want to look more professional with your gear and everything. Popping that lens hood on makes the photographic gear look more professional, looks more kitted out, and that can be very useful for getting into places or looking like you a sense of authority. So that's the breakdown of the main reasons why I generally either use the lens hood or I don't use the lens hood on the 70 to 200 f2.8 Canon lens. Whether it's about protecting the lens, reducing the lens flare, or simply just looking professional, it really depends on your shooting style and your situation. If you found this helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more tips. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.